Thank you so much for joining me on this Community News Desk segment for Summit 2021. It's a pleasure to be chatting with you here in the Fastpath booth. But before we get started, I was wondering if you could just kind of introduce yourself, who you are, what your role is here at Fastpath.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, first and foremost. So my name is Dennis Christiansen. I head up the strategic initiatives for our sales side of things with Microsoft Dynamics at Fastpath Solutions.
Yeah, keep this all front and center. Well, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of initiatives going on, speaking of Microsoft, and they ever march to the cloud, and a lot of people migrating there, and or trying to understand the cloud better and make it more secure. And try to how they can do that strategically, especially if the highly compliant, highly regulatory environment that they have, and you need to make sure how they can do a lot of those things. But so I've got to dive in here a bit and ask, what kind of problems does Fastpath really solve for its customers?
Absolutely. So really what we focus on is helping customers understand who's got access in their systems. So whether that's 365 for finance and operations or any of the dynamic stack, we're going to help them understand who's got access, what kind of risk is tied with that access. So from a segregation of duty standpoint, and then ultimately, what did they do with that access? Did they go in and change any data inside of the system? So really with that eye towards compliance and making sure that you've got tight controls over your environment.
Right. And obviously the segregation of duties, you don't want a person doing one thing that they're not supposed to, but it should be handled by somebody else. But it also helps that clean audit trail at the end of the day. And I've been a part of those, quite a few of those myself, actually, through the years. So I know what it's like and the hassles if you don't have a solution like this in place to really help streamline that process. When the auditors come in and asking for information, it's great to have that handy. To prove things, actually.
Hey, absolutely. I mean, really, that's what our job is, to give you that reporting to really help make that job easier, to really get the auditors off your back.
Well, and another way to kind of look at it, and I see this as like not only from a security perspective, but also it's a trust perspective. So that you can entrust not only your employees, but also the customers can have a trust in you, knowing that you're handling their information. This data is critical nowadays. Handling that in the right way, given whatever industry you're in, compliance you have to meet.
Absolutely.
So that there's a trust that's going both ways there. I think a solution like this can really help bolster that trust.
Absolutely.
Organizations. So now, we're speaking of some of this trust and this what Fastpass does, but I'd love to dive in a bit on the impact. We touched a bit here on the regulatory compliance and how we can make things secure and help with auditors and things of that nature. But what kind of impact are you seeing with your customers, and really like the time they're saving along the way by using this solution?
Yeah. So what we find, when our customers come to us, they're doing things very manually, right? A lot of Excel spreadsheets, a lot of emails, back and forth. It is a very time-consuming process, and it's very hard to make it repeatable. And then that's when the auditors don't trust it. So ultimately, what we do is help automate those processes, and that can save companies upwards of 80% of the time, 90% of the time. It's going to reduce risk by a tremendous amount as well. And when you start adding all those things up, that starts to impact the bottom line pretty quick, and you start to see a return on investment pretty quickly. Especially in an area with like finance and operations, where security is tied so closely to licensing. There's a lot of benefits there where people can see some major ROI return on managing their licenses better from a Microsoft perspective.
Yeah, it's because of the name user licenses and so forth versus a pool of licenses.
Correct.
For example, like in the Dynamics GP model, for example. But I remember, I don't want to say fondly the days, but having to do spreadsheet Olympics and big matrices to make sure who has what security and what they can do and so forth. And but I didn't have that layer of what did they touch, like you said, and what did they change, and what would be the impact of something changing like that, because that could be a bad impact, because we talked about that trust that goes along with it. So you talked about the time there that they're saving. Is there what's that spin up time, that implementation time?
Well,
pretty quick there?
yeah. So there's really kind of two ways that we look at it, right?
Okay.
At Fastpath, we provide a lot of out-of-the-box reports, right?
Okay.
So an out-of-the-box SOD rule set. We provide some templates from an audit trail perspective. So that gives us the ability to get people up and running, those out-of-the-box reports very quickly. We measure that in a matter of hours.
Oh, wow.
So that impact can be seen pretty quickly. Now, obviously, every company is different, right? And not every SOD rule set is going to be perfect for everyone. So there is a level of customization that goes in there. We provide unlimited training and support. And so that helps companies get in and understand how to make those changes. When we see companies go in and really put some focus on it, they can be customized in about 2 weeks, 4 weeks, somewhere in there. But really, they can start seeing impacts, right away.
Right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you have those out of the box things ready to go.
Sure.
That they once they get used to things and monitor what information they get out of those reports, then say, okay, let's start tweaking these things.
Right.
I'm glad you got the flexibility, so that because every business is unique. No matter they could be in the same 50 industry or 50 companies in the same industry.
Yep.
They all have their unique set of requirements and rules, regulations they're following, if they're public or private type of companies. So yeah, big impact. So I think they've seen a quick return over in a matter of just weeks versus dragged out months and still things flying under the radar, if you will, because you're missing it through manual efforts.
Right. Well, and the biggest benefit sometimes is that people don't necessarily know where to start. Right. People are given the responsibility sometimes from a security or compliance standpoint. It's not their main job. So giving those jumping off points. Our company was founded by auditors, so we work with a lot of audit firms.
Okay.
So building that intelligence in really helps companies kind of at least have that starting point, right? That touchstone to feel confident and then move forward.
I've got to ask. I can kind of see where you put something like this in, and I'm sure it can surface things that were unknown to people.
Right.
Like, I thought our security was pretty tight, and then put this in, and you're like, well, wait a minute, what's going on here?
How many, main users do we have? Yeah.
How many sysadmins we got?
The sysadmins everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So, so let me kind of cap things off here a bit. And,
sure.
What are some top reasons that customers want to select Fastpath as a solution for them?
Sure. I think at the end of the day, why people come to us, one, we've been in this space, working with Microsoft and kind of in the user community space for over 17 years.
Okay.
Like I mentioned, our company was founded by auditors. So we are recognized as a leader in the space, someone kind of a trusted resource.
Right.
And we help a lot of folks in the community just with those education sessions, right? I mean, security is difficult, and we've got a lot of very smart folks on staff that understand security inside and out. So that kind of is what drives them to us, is that level of knowledge and that expertise. And then ultimately it's the benefits of the solution, where it's easy to use, it's easy to report on. We have what we consider to be the leading support and training teams in the industry. If you look at some of the recognitions on G2, you'd see that. And so really that helps get people up and running quickly again. We have a value path process and a customer success team that's really going to drive their success. We're focused on the outcomes that they want to achieve. And ultimately, the relationships that we've created with auditors go a long way as well. Another key component that we bring to the table is a lot of companies are a part of maybe bigger companies, right? And so not only do we work with Dynamics, we also work with the SAPs and Oracles of the world, and that ability to do cross-platform SOD. So maybe you have a process that starts in one system and terminates in another. There's risk there. And the auditors are really keying in on that now. So our ability to go across systems in one easy-to-use platform, ultimately all those things tie into why customers come to us and then stay with us.
Yeah, that really, you keyed on a good point there as far as that data trail that happens. Starting in one system or through a subsidiary of a larger corporation, subsidiaries using, Business Central, for example, or finance and operations, but another subsidiary is using Oracle or SAP, but data transfers between both. Who has access to those things? What's happening with that data? Is somebody updating it along the way? So I can see that filling that gap really is what's going on, and especially since cybersecurity is a hot topic for many nowadays, considering it's in the news a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So layering in this on top of, in conjunction with, I should say, with a lot of the cybersecurity measures that you put in place along with your systems, not only from an intrusion standpoint, but also from a zero trust standpoint. You've got to have that in place to really ensure that things are tight. So I think that really helps cap things off, to fill in those gaps where things exist, and really get that speed of value.
And you bring up a good point where Microsoft does a fantastic job of kind of putting things in place to keep folks out, right? That intrusion side of it. But a lot of times, fraud or risk can come internally. So at the business application level, that's where we're filling that gap. And really helping people lock down that business application and understanding what kind of risk they have there.
Well, and the risk could be intentional and unintentional too. Somebody could key something in and click something wrong, just not thinking or having a bad day. And then all of a sudden, the risk escalates because things weren't locked down. It's totally unintentional, but auditors probably wouldn't see it that way.
No, they never do.
And I like to kind of end on it. And it's good to hear that the people who actually kind of try to satisfy at the end of the day actually found it, got this thing started. So it's kind of it caps off, the purpose of what Fastpath can do and what it's providing to folks out there. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. It's been a pleasure learning more about Fastpath. And thank you for joining for this Community News Desk for Summit 2021.
Thanks, Aaron.